Hello, and welcome to Break Check, a Rocket League esports podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about the North American Regional number 2 for this final spring split of the RLCS 21-22 season. So, obviously, you can see the first topic up is NA close quals. We got PK, Torrent, and XSET making their way back into regionals. The one that I think is most exciting is probably going to be PK, and we're going to glance over at why I think it's so exciting. So PK is a team that I think a lot of people had hopes for at the beginning of the season, and unfortunately they just didn't. They weren't able to get the results that they wanted and they expected, I think. So we can see if we look back here in the fall, they were in the closed qualifier for event number 1, event number 2, and event number 3, and eventually they made it into fall regional number 3. And then in winter, they missed out on closed qualifier number 1. They finally made it into the closed qualifier of number 2, but did not make main event, and then missed out on closed qual for the third event of the winter. So they were absent from all main events throughout the winter. And then spring rolls around, and once again, miss out on the first closed qualifier for regional number 1. And then finally, they get back in that closed qual for event number 2, and even make it into the main event. So PK was definitely, very excited for that team. I think they are better than their results indicate. I think those players have plenty of talent, especially now because the current iteration of the roster is Sosa alongside J. Russ and Cheese. And again, I do think that their results are not indicative of what they're capable of. And we'll see what happens in the offseason and whether they stick together or end up bringing in somebody new or some of those players go elsewhere. Who knows what the future holds. But for now, I'm excited to see them back into this main event. So let's talk about closed qualifier first up. We also mentioned Torrent and XSET. Those are teams that have made it into some main events, but they missed out on the most recent. And so I'm excited to see them back, and I wanted to mention that. We got Torrent also kind of popping off in all reality in this closed qualifier. They take down E-United 3-0. They take down PK 3-0, and then they take down Ghost, who has been very strong as of lately. They take them down in Game 5. So big ups to Torrent there. We also have Rogue doing what Rogue, in my opinion, should do in these closed qualifiers. I really don't think Rogue should ever be going to round 5. I think they should probably go 3-0 or 3-1. But they took care of business. They take down Little Step Bros 3-1. They take down All Mid, who has started to prove that they're a pretty consistent bubble level team. They're looking pretty good. So All Mid, they take them down 3-0. And then they take down XSET, who's also looking pretty strong. XSET, I had the opportunity to watch the series, cast the series even, and XSET looked freaking dominant, absolutely incredible in games 1 and 2, and then Rogue was able to kind of turn things around and get that reverse sweep. And what an abrupt shift in gameplay! What an abrupt shift in momentum! Again, XSET was absolutely dominant in the first couple of games of that series, and I was really concerned for Rogue. I was afraid they were going to get swept, and then maybe end up a little bit frustrated in round 4, and maybe not perform well, and then end up kind of back in round 5 where we all too frequently find Rogue. So I was really, really excited to see this. It's a good sign for, competitive mentality, competitive experience and stuff like that to be able to take that reverse sweep in that qualifying round 3. So good for Rogue. Great performance there. 3-0 for Rogue, 3-0 for Torrent. Good stuff. We got Ghost. Like I said, very strong team as of lately, and they proved it here. They end up falling to Torrent, who was performing very well, and we're gonna get onto that when we get into the main event. Torrent continued to run through there. So I don't want to hold this too much against Ghost. We look at these other ones, 3-0, 3-0. They did go to Game 5 with Nefarious, but Nefarious is a good team as well. So Ghost taking care of business, this in my opinion. XSET also 3-1, and Sonics 3-1. Again, these are teams like I think they should be doing this. I think they should be going 3-0 or 3-1. These are the teams that, in my opinion, they should be making main event. These final 3 spots are a little bit up in the air. We got sometimes Rebellion, sometimes United. Accelerates look pretty good. PK, All Mid has started, and obviously Accrue, Randoms. We want to see, and Stromboli too, which is previously CLT. We want to see them in here, but these are the teams that I think are the most consistent and probably have the most strength that come out of the closed qualifier events. But XSET here, 3-0 against Stromboli, which, like I said, is previously Charlotte, CLT. And then we got a 3-0 over Rebellion as well. And I think these are 2 really good performances because those are 2 good teams as well. They may not be as consistent as XSET, or maybe they don't have as high of a ceiling, but I think they're very solid teams, and 3-0s are obviously always good. They end up losing to Rogue, like I said, a reverse sweep. That's tough. That's a tough result from XSET. You don't want to ever drop a 2-0 lead like that in a best of 5, but Rogue, they really clawed it back, and they perform really well. and then they take down 6-lit here in 3-2, and that's a good win as well. You can kind of see it here where that maybe that reverse sweep impacted their feelings a little bit moving into this fourth round, but they were able to clutch up and make it happen, so good for them. We got Sonics 1-3 to PK, then they 3-0 United, they 3-2 Rebellion, and then they 3-2 All Mid. Both, like I said, very solid rosters, so good for Sonics as well. And Sonics, when we get to the main event, we'll talk about them. And Sonics look pretty good in the main event as well. Then we got All Mid, Accelerate, and PK coming through in that round 5 with a 3-2 finish. And All Mid end up taking down Accelerate in round 1. They fall to Rogue. They take down Little Step Bros. They fall to Sonics. And so, look, from All Mid's perspective, we can't be too, obviously we don't want to ever get swept, but we can't be too upset with this. We got our only 2 losses are to main event teams and 2 teams that I think are pretty solid main event teams, especially when we look at how they performed when we get into the main. So All Mid can't hang their head about this. And then we got a 3-0 over E United, a very solid round 5 performance. Accelerate, like I said, they fall to All Mid in round 1. They fall to Little Step Bros. Now, looks, I'm going to say right now that I don't think that there are a ton of teams that I would predict to reverse sweep a Swiss stage event like this other than Accelerate. I think Accelerate is a very disciplined team. I think they've got a wonderful, wonderful team environment, team chemistry. They've got a great coach in Ronskian. And I think it takes that kind of team environment and that team mentality to do something like this. And so props to them. They take down Stromboli. They take down Nefarious. And then they also take down 6-lit here in round 5, in game 5, on top of that, to clutch it up. We had 2 game 5s back-to-back. So, in my opinion, that speaks volumes about Accelerate and their team environment and their mentality towards the game and just competitive mentality in general. So good for them. And I think that is 2 events back-to-back for Accelerate, if I'm not mistaken. We can check that out before I get too far. And Accelerate they have definitely made some events in the past. Yes, spring event, Regional 1 and Regional 2. So I'm excited to see Accelerate start to build a little bit of that consistency. I think that's kind of what they were missing. They may not have the peak that some of these other teams right here have, but they are a very solid team. And I think they are raising their floor, which is always exciting to see. Talked about them a little bit. They go 3-1 against Sonics. They fall 3-0 to Torrent. Torrent's on a tear. They take Randoms down in game 5, and then they fall 3-0 to Ghost. Again, we don't want to get swept, but if we're going to get swept, these are 2 teams that we can't be too upset about. And then they take down Rebellion in round 5 in a 3-1 fashion. So good for all these teams that are qualifying. A little bit more consistency from these 2 squads right here, which is exciting to see. All Mid and Accelerate. Those are players that have been grinding for a long time. I'm excited to see that. And this Pittsburgh Knights roster is a roster that they have had their struggles, and I'm excited to see them finally make it back into these main events and show what they're about. So, and then they had some pretty good performance in the main event as well. So we'll look at that in just a moment. Then we got the teams that unfortunately did not qualify are 6-lit, Shopify, Rebellion, and E United. They fell in round 5. We had Little Step Bros, Nefarious, and Randoms falling in round 4. And we had Accrue and Stromboli falling in round 3, going 0-3. And this is very surprising. I mean, just the regional before in closed qualifier, Stromboli, which was CLT at the time, they went 3-0. They actually only lost 1 single game in the closed qualifier. Not a match, a game, like 1 game. They lost their first one, and they won 9 straight games. They 3-3 straight through. So Stromboli struggling here in this one. Obviously, good teams that they're losing to. All these teams in this closed qualifier are good, but this is a very disappointing result. And Accrue, I mean, this is tough, and here's the crazy thing about Accrue. They lost to 3 teams that didn't qualify. And so Accrue, in my opinion, they have so much potential, but we're just not seeing the consistency that we want to see. There's a lot of variation in the performance that we see out of this team. So hopefully we can see Accrue start to just improve that consistency and hopefully show us what they're actually capable of, because I think they are a really good roster, and I'm hopeful that that team can show their potential, because like I said, they're a great roster. They've been together for a long time, and I have high hopes for them. The next thing I want to talk about is Ghost in particular. So with Ghost finishing top 4 in the previous event, we kind of expected, there were quite a bit of people that were really excited about this Ghost roster and expected maybe not another top 4, but another top 8, another top 6. And unfortunately, Ghost wasn't really able to do that. They did come across a hot Envy team who looked pretty good, and then they fall to the lower bracket, and unfortunately, they run into Space Station, which is just, I mean, this is just terrible luck. This is not going to happen frequently, but I mean, sometimes, like one point that I heard brought up in a podcast throughout the week was, people were saying Envy got the Mickey bracket. Envy take down Ghost, and then they take down Xset, and then they take down Complexity. And so you're looking at this and you think from Ghost's perspective, you're like, oh man, that is so unlucky. They ran into Space Station. But then on the flip side of that, that position that they're in is actually a lucky position as well. They could have just run through X set and complexity, and then they've been, they would have been a top 3 performance right there. So unlucky to run into Space Station, but it would have been lucky, very lucky, very fortunate if they win. And so this is why, we hear these people, we hear everybody talk about, unlucky or a good draw in the bracket or whatever. And I really think that, the main thing is we really just got to win the games. We got to win the games, and that is the most important thing. So Ghost, unlucky for sure, but also we could have performed better. We could have done a better job. And then, if they just win this first series, they could have, there's no telling. They could have been a top 3. And that would have almost for sure solidified their spot moving into the spring major. So tough there for Ghost. You hate to see that. But I do believe that even though we've had kind of some wild results where they pop off and they go top 4 and then they fall out 0-2, I still think neither of those results should be taken as law. I think that we need to give them some more time to develop. And I do think that Ghost team is probably going to be a pretty solid roster contending for that top 6, top 7 area. Next up, we got to talk about Torrent. They start the event on freaking fire and just continue that momentum from the close qual. Like I said, 3-0 in the close qual, very impressive performance. And the thing that we always have to mention when we're talking about these close qualifier teams is that when you get into the main event, it's obviously a different level, a different caliber of competition. And so even though you might go 3-0 in close qual, Rogue went 3-0 as well, that doesn't guarantee that you're going to pop off in this main event. But Torrent, they continued on their run, and they took down, they take down NRG in a 3-0 sweep, and then they take down version 1, 3-1. So huge results from Torrent. Incredible stuff. Very, very exciting. Now, they do run into the Giant in G2, and, that's kind of tough, but it is what it is. I'm sure that Torrent is very excited about their top 8 finish, and, again, they should just, they should be proud of that and try to build on that momentum moving into this 3rd regional and this final or this next season. After that, I do want to talk about NA depth. We've got Complexity bouncing back in this spring split after a relatively rough winter. We've got Envy in the same situation, bouncing back in this spring split. Much better performances here in the first 2 regional. We've got Xset and Torrent taking big wins here early in the event, early in the bracket. And it just starts, it starts the conversation of where is this NA depth? What are we looking at? Because forever, and when I'm saying, what I'm talking about is, seasons ago, there were really just, there was a name for the teams that dominated, and it was called the Big 3, Cloud9, G2, NRG. And it was just very, 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 very rare for any teams to take games or series off of those. They were just seriously dominant. NA has always been a very top-heavy region. And over time, it has strengthened a little bit. I think when we got into that RLCSX season, we saw Space Station jump into the mix. We see Envy jump into the mix. Rogue with First Killer in that season, they started to kind of threaten. And so it has slowly trickled down a little bit. But this, especially the latter half of this season, it's really felt like, and I do want to clarify, I'm not saying that these mid-tier, 6 through 10 level teams are about to pop off and win the events. We may not see that yet, but we're starting to see a little bit of parity. We're seeing some of these results like an XSET level team take down Space Station. We're seeing these results where a Torrent will take down a V1 and an NRG. We're seeing that happen occasionally. And that is, we're seeing Complexity kind of, or they move into the region and they pop off in the fall, but they had a lackluster winter, and now they're taking, the series off of phase. And we're seeing just a little bit of volatility in the region. And I think that's good for the viewers. I think it's even good for those top level teams. I know that it's probably easy to get complacent and feel comfortable and excited or confident about things when you don't really get challenged, and there are not really any teams other than your peers, like the top 2 or top 3 that put you in a tough situation as a team and take you deep into series and whatnot. But I think this is a big win for the region because it's going to further motivate those top level teams to, grind harder and make sure that they take every team and every match and every game seriously, because there's no time to underestimate. If you underestimate these teams, they're going to sneak up and they're going to get some dubs and they're going to knock you into a place where now you're going to, you're going to have a tough time qualifying for this major. Whereas if it was a few seasons ago, the majors may have been, shoo-ins for these top 3, top 4 teams. It may have been like very carefree, no stress, right? Because nobody really threatened them. But now that's not so much the case. We see some of these teams. I mean, we'll talk about points in a minute, but NRG is a team that nobody ever expects them to miss out on international events. And they're in a position where they have got to perform very, very well in this third regional if they want to go to London. So, again, NA depth is definitely improving, absolutely improving. And I just wanted to highlight that for a moment. And then this last thing that I want to talk about is just G2 dominance. I mean, absolutely freaking incredible. They look unstoppable. They really do. I know that I have talked about how any of these teams around their level, the FaZe clans, the space stations, the NRGs, I would even say the Envies, the Complexities, I don't know if I said FaZe, but or Ghost even. I think that those teams can challenge G2. They can definitely take games and potentially even take series, V1 as well, but they haven't. No one has. Not in Regional 1, not in Regional 2. G2 have just been absolutely incredible. And I want to give a big shout out to Sathu, their coach. Obviously, the players deserve a ton of credit and a ton of praise, but I have to assume from the outside looking in that Sathu has played a role in their success. I mean, they just recently added Atomic to the roster for the winter split, and just straight out of the gate, they hit the ground running. They started, I think, the first regional of the winter split. They didn't get the results that they wanted, but they immediately turned things around. Regional 2, Regional 3, they look pretty good. Obviously, going to the winter major, they take the dub there, and then they continue that momentum. Regional 1 and Regional 2 of the spring split here in North America, in their own region, they take dubs, and they're not even, they're not falling to the lower bracket. And so, can they complete the trifecta and take all 3 regionals here in the spring split, the final split moving into Worlds? And, it's something that out in between NA and EU, I don't think it's been done before. I think it has happened in MENA. We've got the powerhouse of Falcons taking every regional this season, so they're incredible. But the 2 regions that have been established for a long time, and even OCE and SAM, I don't think it's happened there. Seriously impressive performance, impressive run from G2 so far. So very excited for them. I know that they're pumped for their results too, right? And the more that you win, the more confident you're going to feel, the more comfortable you're going to feel. They don't have any stress about the major. They're just in a great position, and they have themselves to thank for their hard work. One last point that I want to make is I think it's very easy to come off of a big dub like the winter major and then maybe just take a few days or a little bit of time to relax. But it sounds like G2 didn't do that. They got right back to work, and that is showing in their results. Now, before I get out of here, what I do want to do is I want to look at points a little bit and kind of break down the potential outcomes for this London Spring Major, because this is easily the most up for grabs that these spots have been. In the previous 2 splits, most things have been determined outside of maybe the last spot, or maybe the 4th and 5th spot are kind of up for grabs between 2 or 3 teams. But this right here in North America is absolutely wide open. G2 is clinched. Nobody's taking it from them, even if they bomb out, which is probably not going to happen. But they have clinched. We've got V1 in the 2nd place spot. We got Envy in the 3rd place spot. And we got FaZe 4th, tied with Space Station. NRG is in that 6th spot at 380. And then Complexity, Ghost, and Rogue are still in. They're still in the running, especially when we look at the fact that we're rocking with a double elim format, which gives us we just saw it, some wacky results. If we get another event where Space Station's knocked to lowers immediately, NRG's knocked to lowers immediately, version 1 falls down to lowers early, FaZe Clan falls down to lowers early. These points, there's no telling what's going to happen. There's absolutely no telling. So this final regional is going to be extremely high stakes. We've got the potential of the Captain America, Garrett G, potentially missing out on his first RLCS LAN ever. That sucker has been to Season 1 through, every LAN event that is an RLCS official LAN event, he has been there. And my God, y'all want to talk about some consistency. That is impressive, and it deserves praise. But now that we're moving into this 3rd regional, and NRG had a sluggish start to this spring split, that run could come to an end. We'll see how they perform. I also do want to look at the overall points, because this is something that we're going to have to keep our eyes on for Worlds. So right now, and this is not totally, this is kind of complex to look at, but it's not totally determined how many teams are going to auto-qualify into the actual World Championship from North America. It's likely going to be 3. It potentially could be. We just have to see how the North American region as a whole performs when they go to London. But right now, G2 is locked and loaded. They're good to go. NRG and FaZe, they're locked as well for at least the World's wild card. At least wild card. And we've got Space Station about 500 points behind FaZe Clan, which is going to be tough to catch up because FaZe Clan is looking good for the London Major. If Space Station were to qualify for London Major and FaZe and NRG didn't, then Space Station can make a big jump, but we'll just have to see how that unfolds. And then we got Version 1 who came, they started the season a little bit slower. They didn't make it to the Fall Major. And then in the spring, my goodness, they turned things up. And V1 has just been on a tear, chasing these top 3, top 4 teams as far as points. And then we got Envy and Complexity, and we know what happened there. Both teams qualified for the Fall Major, and then they had a hard fall off in the winter. And so they're still in a good position. They're probably not going to jump anyone unless something crazy happens where, a few of these teams don't go to Major and these teams do, and they perform well. But even so, Envy and Complexity are in a great spot for the World's wildcard. So let me try to explain that. If we have 3 teams that go straight to the World Championship, if North America gets 3 auto-qual spots, that means the next 3 teams following them are going to be plugged into the wildcard. So if that was the case, that would be Space Station, V1, and Team Envy if we currently froze things how they are. Obviously, that could change. We could see, Rogue and Oxygen are probably a little bit too far off for the wild card, especially because they're probably not going to make this major. But between Envy and Complexity, they're neck and neck. They are right there beside each other, and we don't know what's going to happen. We could also, if North America as an entire region performs well in London, we could see 4 spots auto-qual straight into Worlds. And if that was the case, these 4 teams would go, and that means that these 3 would be plugged into the wild card iteration of the World Championship. So, with that being said, we got a lot of fun stuff coming up. It is going to be a really, really exciting next couple months. All the marbles on the line in this final split of the season, in this final regional of this split, trying to make it into that major and just grab these last few points that you can. This is what it all comes down to. This is what it's all about. I'm excited to see how it unfolds, but that's going to do it for this show. I appreciate everybody watching, and we will catch you next time.